Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks, Mike. So my name is Ron George. I'm from Dalhousie University for another couple of weeks at least. Sorry. So I'm going to talk a little, and this is sort of the lighter side of these sessions. This is not going to be heavy in academia, but it is kind of a way to help you understand how I use social media to promote my research, promote research in anesthesia in general, as well as how perhaps there are ways in which you can use social media for when you're thinking around career or advancement. So I do want to thank everybody for the invitation here today. So I am an avid voyeur of all social media. I'm a zealous user of Twitter. If you are on that medium, then you probably have seen me send a few tweets, and I do a lot of tweeting during meetings. So social media is a bit about talking, it's participating, it's sharing, it's networking, all done online, depending on what platform you want to use. And this is despite the fact that most people are just voyeurs. Most people are just there to watch and to see what other people are doing. Now, I put this up because, one, as I said, I want to thank the people at Dalhousie University for the years of growth that I had there, and looking forward to my new home at UCSF. But you know, I just obtained full professor at Dalhousie University recently, and it was because I think, not directly because of my use on social media, but social media enabled me to accelerate the path forward by ensuring that my name was out there, my research was out there, my career path was out there, and so it enabled me to accelerate some of the collaborations, networking, and activities that lead to one becoming getting promoted. And the other thing is, you'll see I have my Twitter handle on my traditional business card, because people still use business cards quite a bit, and you want to grow that community whenever possible. So I'm going to briefly describe some of the platforms that are necessary for anesthesiologists to be part of social media, describe some of the value that I think is out there for anesthesiologists and why you should be on there, and simultaneously highlight some of the opportunities to use it for promoting your research and career advancement. And hopefully there'll be time for questions afterwards, and we'll hang around during the network session. So I do look forward to your questions. I don't have any financial disclosures. I only wish I had stock in Twitter or Facebook from way back when. Social media is a relatively new space for physicians. It has enormous possibilities for research, education, and dissemination of medical sciences. And institutions are only really starting to understand how to use this and how to recognize some of the scholarship activity that goes along with social media. And this is probably one of the only few publications that really addresses this. And I'm going to mention a few things from it later on, but it's a very good reference article, and it lists some of the ways in which the Mayo Clinic is acknowledging the scholarly work that's being done on social media. So most people, when you say I'm on social media, I'm on Twitter, this is what they immediately go to, and you will not find it. Well, sometimes you'll figure out what I had for breakfast because you take pictures at a meeting or with friends, but really that's not what it's all about. In this global environment that we're living in, social media and Twitter is really connecting anesthesia providers from across the globe. So social media is a modern approach to staying informed, to disseminating information, to getting that valuable anesthesia science content that we're all looking for. And it's now becoming an accepted forum for doctors, patients, researchers, professional groups. It is the opportunity to connect with your colleagues, establish thought leadership within your field, keep current with the research that's out there, build those collaborations and networks, develop your professional reputation, and then drive traffic to your educational media or your department's media or to your research, depending on how you maintain that. And if you look, leadership, research, professional education, these are all key aspects of building an academic career and things that you're going to need to highlight and work on when you're trying to work through the professorial track and career advancement. So healthcare workers, we sometimes get a little anxious when we're talking about social media, but it's the same skills that we use, communication. And I don't know if you remember this morning, if you were there for the president of CIHR's discussion and how he did not like social media personally, but he did see the value in it. And the value is it is a communication forum, and this is where we need to better understand how we communicate with each other and how we communicate with patients. And you're not going to be alone, so jump off the cliff and get into social media. There's 3.5 billion people. That's 45% of the world's population using some form of social media. You will not be alone. And it's growing every year. It's continuing to grow year after year. All the platforms are gaining followers, and people are using social media in their own communities. And in the US, over 70% of the population is actively using one form of social media or another. And most do it on devices that we carry with us every single day, even into our operating rooms, our cell phones. Now, I'm not advocating that in your operating room you should be tweeting or doing social media posts or taking pictures in the operating room, but you do have the tools at hand with you all the time. There's a multitude of networking applications and platforms out there with a very small number that handle the majority of the traffic. Is there anybody in this room who's not on one of these forms of social media? Very small number. Really? None? Really? Not even WhatsApp? I originally wouldn't have thought of WhatsApp as a social media networking kind of platform, but it is. It's mostly a closed type of platform, but it is used a lot. And I actually have some working groups with social media on WhatsApp with my global health work, where we're constantly sharing information amongst anesthesiologists all over the world. Now, most social media platforms, regardless of where you look at and what they are unfortunately mostly are male-driven right now, except for something like Instagram. Instagram has a much more female predominance in the usage of social media. And we don't have this broken up in terms of, we don't have the data around in healthcare who's using what and how that break is, but that could be an interesting sort of discussion. And it does matter sort of sometimes which platforms you're talking about. LinkedIn happens to be very much male-driven. So they all have their own different attributes, and depending on which audience you're looking for, that's where you're going to be using it. And these platforms all do have societal benefits. They are social utilities, and we have to be part of that conversation. We need to understand how these social utilities work so that we can then utilize them for our own careers and well-being. So where do health providers spend some of their time, some of their valuable time, and when they're on social media? Well, Twitter happens to be probably the most, the primary place where most healthcare practitioners, health scientists will spend most of their time on social media, followed closely by Instagram, and Instagram is definitely gaining momentum. But I think for healthcare providers, it's been a challenging one because the dissemination fact is hard. It doesn't disseminate as widely and rapidly as Twitter, and pictures are challenging in personal health information venues, so you need to be cautious of that. So most of us are on Twitter, and like I said, that's my primary home. And Twitter is a microblogging platform that allows registered users to publish and read their 280 character messages or tweets on a very public and continuously updating feed of posts. And so I like this statement: Facebook is where you lie to your friends, and Twitter is where you tell the truth to strangers. And this is by John Ronson. And Men Who Stare at Goats. Anybody familiar with John Ronson? He also wrote a book recently in the last couple of years, So You've Been Publicly Shamed. If you're going to go into social media, it's worthwhile having a read of this book to see what happens when people make errors on social media. And then I would ask you to, if you're on social media, have a look at this week. Earlier this week, Dr. Payne was talking on health informatics and a discussion around dissemination, and the Kardashian index got mentioned. And sarcasm doesn't always go well on social media. And I felt really, there was a lot of interesting dialogue that came out of it, but Dr. Payne felt a lot of the negative side of that dialogue. And so there are some things to be concerned about in how and what you share on social media. A common question that comes up occasionally is, do I need to be a split personality? Do I need to be, Ron A and Ron B on different social media platforms? And it's a difficult question, and one that each person needs to kind of analyze. I'm sort of the opinion that for the most part, you'll find that I am a single person. I'm a professional on social media at all times, no matter which platform. And no matter what, you're a doctor here, you're a doctor at dinner tonight, you're going to be a doctor out at the pub tonight. And there's a level of professionalism that's going to be expected, and you do need to maintain that. Now, I would say in the sense of splitting, I do have sort of multiple, I use different platforms for different things. So if you look at my Instagram account, it is all my personal photography, which is where I like to spend any surplus dollars I have is on camera equipment. And my Facebook is my wife and I's travel, and so that's where you'll find the division. But on Twitter, you'll see I'm very much an obstetric anesthesiologist sharing evidence and trying to inform the public and inform my colleagues, but also putting a little bit of fun in there occasionally. So you do have to kind of figure out where you fit in here and how you want to utilize social media. Some people do completely advocate for two different accounts, a personal Twitter account, a professional Twitter account. You're going to run into trouble when that happens. You're going to start to post things on your personal account that is still public and still associated with your professional account that are likely going to run into a bit of difficulty. How we use social media varies quite a bit. As I said, I use my Twitter account to disseminate my own research, to disseminate knowledge within the obstetric anesthesia realm. And that's how most of us do use social media, knowledge exchange. We do a bit of networking, some professional development, and you'll see health promotion and self-promotion are down at the bottom there. And you will find that there are a lot of individuals who are using it to promote their products and their brand, and there's nothing necessarily wrong with that, but you do need to kind of evaluate that when you're determining who your community is going to be. As I mentioned, there's a lot of turmoil when you go onto social media, and you will see it. But as you develop your community, your curated community of reasonably like-minded individuals, you'll see less and less of that. If you just go blindly into social media, then you're going to see more of it. And in this era of partisan divide and social media discourse, missteps can be amplified very quickly. So just tread lightly. Be a voyeur first. Kind of see what's out there. See how other professional anesthesiologists, academic anesthesiologists are utilizing social media, and evaluate that before you just jump into the social media pool. And when it does occur, use your civil discourse. Focus on the issues and not on the individuals. Too often these things start to amplify and escalate because we focus on the individual at the other end. But I'd encourage you to go in this very open-minded and respecting all ideas, even if you don't actually agree with them. And so I think one of the things I really enjoy about social media is it is everybody. Okay, there is the good, the bad, the ugly, but you're going to find that if you step outdoors of this hotel. It's the good, the bad, the ugly. But it can seem like it's worse on social media, but it's society that's on there. Oh, wrong way. So at its core, Twitter has four basic functions: creations of tweets, finding and following other people and users, starting a conversation, whether you're answering a tweet or replying to a tweet, liking important tweets, or both to acknowledge them, but also to serve as a bookmark. And there are ways in which you can curate all that activity into sort of a knowledge bank in tracking things like publications, like specific knowledge users and what they promote. And the personal branding movement is sort of a natural extension of the consumer branding and self-packaging and creating what is unique about you. And so your social media profile, and this is my example from Twitter, your social media profile is going to become your brand, okay? It is your biography, and it should reflect your mission, your vision of what you're trying to accomplish with social media, what you're trying to accomplish as a young academic anesthesiologist, any other relevant information. It all begins with an avatar, and having a professional photograph up there can be beneficial, and it helps people not only it automatically conveys a bit of trust in the fact that there's a human being there. It's somebody that looks professional, and it's probably somebody you'll see at a meeting up soon. And you know what? I've had numerous people come up and say, "Oh, I've seen you on Twitter. I've seen you on social media. You look just like your picture. Or you look just like your avatar." So keep it up to date, because you don't want your picture from 20 years ago up there. It'll be a little bit of false advertising. Your profile name on Twitter, for example, can be virtually anything. And this is an opportunity for professions to really highlight what you've accomplished and what you are and who you represent, and ensuring that people do know that you are perhaps an anesthesiologist and where you're from. You can use your username. That's the one unique aspect. Your profile name can change as much as you like. You can make it to varying degrees a certain length, but your username is a very fixed identifier. And the only advice I would give there is, once again, it's an opportunity to ensure that you use your own name or a professional name, but it's also an opportunity to link different platforms. And if you can achieve the same name over multiple platforms, it makes it easier as you become a social media influencer. Names like Ron George, it's a little hard to find them. There's pretty common names. And then lastly, a bit of a biography, and this is an opportunity to kind of give people a little bit of knowledge of what you are and who you are, what your interests are. And this is an out-of-date picture, because I've already changed my profile a little bit to reflect that I'm at this meeting and not currently at Azure Spring of 19, which is a great meeting. So if you're going to go to a meeting, Azure 2020 in San Francisco next year will be great. So your professional career is no longer going to be limited to face-to-face or face-to-pager encounters. And in fact, social media platforms offer a brand new way for modern physicians to both discover and discuss information. And as a professional on social media, you need to be aware of who your audience is. And there's a lot of different people out in your audience. First off, your mom is going to be there, possibly. But everybody's mom's possibly out there. And so, if you're not going to say it to your mom, then probably shouldn't be saying things on social media. So just be cognizant of that. Your patients will be out there. And I've had numerous patients who have recognized me from social media, come up to me in the clinic, and, and then it just kind of sparks making sure what you're saying is respectful to all. Your colleagues are going to be out there, and this is an opportunity to build collaborations, show that you have leadership within your area, and kind of develop the networking tools that you can use. And lastly, I'd say the media is out there, and the more you are into social media, the more you may get approached by media who are following people and doctors all the time, looking for little tidbits of information. I'd urge caution, and definitely speak with your public relations individuals at your institutions before you engage with the media. Not that they're up to anything bad, but you just need to have a bit of caution in dealing with those situations. So within social groups, the social structure is determined by how we connect with individuals and the relationships amongst those groups. And the density of those connections is multiplying. It's increased dramatically, and we're seeing increasing levels of collaboration. And the traditional depiction of the hierarchical accountability structures that we're used to seeing in our institutions is slowly changing and becoming less formalized and more resembling the more natural networks. It is a hierarchical destruction tool, social media. Everybody is somebody on social media. So take that with the grain of salt, because it's the good and the bad of certain aspects. So there's a happy medium of what your network should look like. Now, Dr. A, he's got a very diverse network. He's bringing in lots of new information, hearing and listening, depending on whether you're the person bringing it all in or putting it all out. You've got a very diverse network. But you don't necessarily have the network where you're going to be able to bounce ideas off, per se, because you may not be getting that kind of feedback. Whereas Dr. B, in this situation, has a more vibrant, a warm network. This is where you're going to field new ideas, throw things out there, and get feedback from your colleagues, perhaps develop collaborations and research networks. You do have to be cautious of this type of network, because as this network gets more and more insular, this is the classic echo chamber. And so, I try not to create this sort of network, but, you do have smaller groups within that which you can share this information. Now, Twitter and other social networks are becoming increasingly important in medical knowledge mobilization, finding new ways in which we can enhance the uptake of our work. And when you engage a community and you're giving them the means of dissemination, then it's going to grow and take off. I mean, these are some examples of how this has worked. And so Alan's group, they aimed at quantifying the impact of social media on the release, on mobilization of articles within the journal. And the critical results showed that there was a significant increase in the mobilization of information a week after the social media release. Without the social media release, very typical growth. This is an example from Transplantation, where articles that were published in 2015 were downloaded 3 times more often when they were tweeted out to the public. More and more medical journals are using social media, and I happen to help manage and develop the social media front for the Canadian Journal of Anesthesia, and we are becoming more and more interested in how our information is being shared and how we can disseminate it even further. This is becoming very important to the journal world. And so this is an example from Nature that articles had shown growing coverage with the use of Twitter. And the results show that the tweets and the citations are actually correlate pretty well. But lastly, we see that Twitter here, this is an example of how they used Facebook and Twitter. Twitter gave them that expansive dissemination that only Twitter can really do. That's one of the features that I really enjoy about Twitter, is things get amplified. But as I said earlier, the negative also gets amplified a bit too. So you do need to tread lightly. Lastly, this is tweets that can predict highly cited articles. So there's not a lot of causation here. Good articles, generally we know about them soon and they're going to be tweeted about and talked about a lot. But there may be a role here and I think what I'm seeing is journals trying to sort out how they can best disseminate this information as quick as possible and to highlight good articles, but also to get maybe the articles that wouldn't get the attention normally out to the public and their stakeholders sooner. And tweetations and citations measured very different concepts, and they're possibly speaking to very different audiences, but they're not necessarily mutually exclusive audiences, so we need to be cognizant of that. And the last bit of example of this I'll show is online mentions over time from the American Geriatric Society's journal. This is before and after they announced their new social media strategy. And the basis of their strategy was pretty simple. They just essentially were giving authors and asked authors to ask them to provide social media friendly graphs or visual abstracts or some sort of visual cue that they could use to then disseminate the information. Because what we do know is images and now videos amplify social media signal even greater. And for an example of that is the visual abstract. And this was developed by a surgeon, Dr. Ibrahim, at the University of Michigan. And they actually then did a study of that which showed that the use of visual abstracts increases the dissemination of their research. And a visual abstract is just simply a visual means of communicating the key points of an article. Who here sits and reads every word of a poster on a poster board? Yeah, not many people do. And you'll see some examples of the better poster and some of the posters today, the hashtag better posters. Those are the ones with the big type in the middle where they kind of have the highlight of what they're trying to get out and then all the little details that maybe 1 or 2 people are going to read on the sides. But they also usually include a QRL code or some sort of link there so that if you want to get the full abstract, you can do that. But we want to be able to capture people when they come in. They want to be able to see the information as soon as possible. And Mike, you tap me on the shoulder if I'm running a little bit long. Good. This is just an example of, Greg Bryson from the CGA showed this yesterday when they were talking from the editor's board. This is a paper that I wrote, but it's also a visual abstract that I created. And it just helps disseminate that information. And when we look at it from the CGA standpoint, this has been a boost in our dissemination of the research being done and published within the Canadian Journal of Anesthesia. And they're also great tools because the audience that we used to talk to is not the same audience anymore, okay? When I talk to an audience, I'm talking to an audience who most likely has their own audience on social media. So I want them to share and disseminate that information as quickly as possible. If I'm sharing some of my research or some great translating some other research for individuals, I want to get that out to other users as quickly as possible. And you are an audience of audiences. I'm not going to say much because I don't have a whole lot of experience other than my phone is filled with wonderful podcasts. But I'd say that this is a growing area and something that I'm personally working on, some podcast ideas. But there's not a lot of great ones out there from anesthesiology, so there's a bit of a gap there. So for young academics looking to develop an area, this may be something you may want to consider. But these are great ways to convey information around your research. The other way is we need to talk more about these articles in the public. And another example of that is the Anesthesia Journal Club, which Ankit Udani developed at Duke University. And we at Dalhousie University and a few other universities have kind of jumped on board with this, and we have regular journal clubs. And even last year we had one where we had a kind of combined one between Duke and Dalhousie. And it's a great way to link up your anesthesia communities on social media and share further information. The next thing I want to mention is everybody should start to become familiar with things like altmetric. So we're all very used to traditional measures of citations and how many publications I have, how many first author publications I have, and these are all going to be very important when you're maintaining your academic profile. But more and more, you're going to have to understand things like altmetric. And altmetric uses APIs across multiple different platforms to gather data from OpenScripts, from different algorithms that they use. And not only are they gathering the classic citations, they're calculating information from various components like news outlets, blogs, tweets, Facebook posts, Wikipedia, and from Google Plus posts, if that still exists. That still exists? I don't think it exists. Anyhow, you can quickly see from this score where this article ranks, and you can see that it has a wide dissemination pathway, including a lot of news and blogs. So, these are things that we're going to see more and more, and which you're going to be hoping to target some of these things with your publications rather than just the traditional citation route. Once you're out there, you're going to get plenty of opinions. And the power of social media, the power of the anesthesia Twitterverse is totally dependent on the power of your network, the power of your community. And Metcalfe's law states that the value or the power of our network is proportional to the square number of the connected users within our system. This law was developed around when we were talking about the development of the telephone. But lo and behold, it holds true with social media as well. You need to develop a critical mass. But I'll tell you, the amount of value you've got to put in to get to that critical mass on social media is not very great. So you can achieve a powerful network very quickly. One way to do it, this is an example from a colleague of mine, Dr. Christine Chambers. This is an old slide, old picture, because she only has 5,000 followers. She's up to 10,000 now. And Christine's a pediatric pain psychologist who developed the hashtag #ItDoesn'tHaveToHurt around pediatric vaccinations. And she's grown this into CIHR funding, a National Center of Excellence, millions of dollars of funding because of her use of social media and translating research around pediatric pain and putting it in the hands of users and patients in an effective and efficient manner. And she did this by one of the ways in which she amplified this early on was building her network by partnering with an existing network. So she partnered with Erica M. And then people of my generation know Erica M as one of the first VJs, although you had to be Canadian because she was a VJ on Much Music. But Erica M now has the Yummy Mummy Club. And if there are young mothers in the audience, it is a blogging platform for mothers, and it is incredibly popular with millions and millions of followers. And this has enabled Christine to develop her network rather quickly. So whatever your social media goals are, we must find and develop our community. And there are skills in which you're going to be able to gain to do that. Now, this is an interesting quote from a great article in the New England Journal from some wonderful people who you will definitely find. Julie Silver on social media. She's an amazing individual. And social media can facilitate near instantaneous communication across states, continents, and help support trainees and physicians of all genders, races, cultures, specialties, and institutional affiliations. And it does cross all those borders. And I'm just going to finish up with a mention of this article from Cabrera one more time. And just a reference article. It's got some great tables in it which outlines how the Mayo Clinic is utilizing or how they're recognizing the scholarly activity of social media. This is an example of some of the low impact activities that people can get involved in at various stages of their careers. An editor-in-chief or somebody with major editorial duties of an academic or clinical blog with more than 2,000 page views per month. You can see these are examples of non-traditional metrics that the Mayo Clinic and other institutions are going to begin to look at in terms of measuring the scholarly activity of their young professions. So it's important for us to get on to these forums, utilize this, learn how to use this, and to benefit for not only our research, our careers, and of course our patients. And social media-based scholarship, health professions must do a couple of things. First, you got to be original. You got to create original material, original research, and share it. You got to be aiming to advance the field, and that's going to help grow your network and grow your community. You need to archive and, of course, disseminate your records as much as possible. You need to be transparent in these discussions and dialogues that occur on social media. I like the word dialogue a lot more than I like the word debate. I avoid debates on social media as much as possible because there's just somebody looking for a fight and looking to win something. But I love having dialogues on social media. And the last thing I'll just mention is you do need to follow your institutional and organizational guidelines. And we all have them, and they're easy to find, so just search those and ensure that you're following those. And if you do that, and if you use social media, it can be a free and open access available way to grow your academic career, to share your research, and to crush some of those hierarchies that exist within our health institutes. Thank you very much. And I'm lastly going to mention that this time next year, 1 year from now, I hope you will all join me in Halifax, Nova Scotia, my home. It'll be a homecoming for me for SOAP 2020. It's a beautiful city, a brand new convention center. Another reason to come back to Canada for the Americans in the audience, and we'd appreciate you coming to Halifax. And I hope to see you all there. So that's it. Do you want me to stay up here, Mike?
No, you can stay up here. Thank you, Dr. George, for that wonderful insights. I think we're going to hold questions until the end of the session, so we'll have Dr. Evers come up and talk about his topic, and then we'll keep going.
Well, Ron, that was actually really fun and great slides. I think Mike was correct in saying our talks are going to be bookends. I think the Kardashian Index is probably a really good analogy. I have a feeling your Kardashian Index is higher than mine because mine's probably approaching zero. And by the way, the Kardashian Index, as I understand it, is your number of tweets or retweets.
It's a measure of followers versus your citations.
Versus your publication citations. And so, like, Ron represents the numerator, and I think I represent the denominator. And so it'll be fun to contrast our messages. The topic that I was assigned to talk about today was promoting your career advancement through research. Let me get my stuff here. Is there a pointer here or not? Use the mouse. Okay, got it. Got it. Got it. It's fine. And was promoting your career advancement through research and education. I also have no financial relationships with commercial interests to disclose. They ask you to report your funding, which I reported here. I want to do two things today. I want to give you a little bit of philosophy and perspective about this subject, and then I'll finish off by giving you a little bit of practical advice. So first of all, why may you find whatever I have to say valuable? Do I have any wisdom to offer? So just to give you my background, I went to college before most of you were born. I graduated from college before at least some of you were born. Yeah, exactly. And I was originally an internist and then did anesthesiology, then did pharmacology, and I've been a faculty member at WashU since mid-1980s and department chair for 27 years. And I So I've been at it a long time, some experience. Secondly, the department which I've been lucky enough to chair, 8% of all NIH funding that goes to anesthesiology goes to that department, so $1 in $12 goes there. And currently 8% of the 110 or 20 anesthesiology chairs in the United States came from us. So we may be doing some things wrong, but we're also doing some things right. And probably most importantly, I've had a lot of time to make a lot of mistakes, okay? So I hope I can encourage you not to replicate those mistakes. And so this is a bit of a do what I say and some of what I do, but not all of what I do talk. So I want to start off with a little bit of perspective. Actually, one of my favorite poems, Yeats, who said, "When you are old and gray and full of sleep and nodding by the fire, take down this book and slowly read and dream of the soft look your eyes have once and of their shadows deep." And so I'm not at the end of my career, but I'm on the back nine. And so, I do have time to think about this. And I have to say, I wish that I had thought about, hey, what will be important to me? What accomplishments will be important to me now when I started my career? Okay, what are the things that are not going to be meaningful, and what are the things that are going to be meaningful? So I'd actually just encourage you, to take that perspective. And as most of the people in this room are young. There's a few people in my age group here I see, but I think we all want to make plans. We all want to think things through. But there are going to be things that you look at and you say, wow, I'm so happy that I did that. I feel really satisfied and rewarded. And there are other things you can think of weren't good uses of your time. So I want to give you a few pieces of advice, and then I'll get to the practical stuff. So first, mindset and goals. It's not a race. There's not a destination. Okay? Really make a point of making sure that you're enjoying your life and your career. And what I mean by that is not that it's fun every day, but that you're feeling good about it. You're getting satisfaction from it, and that this isn't something you're doing to get ahead. In that light, I'd say, don't aspire to climb the ladder of success. Okay, you want to dig deeply into the things that interest and inspire you, and the reality is that's actually going to help you climb the ladder of success. Because I would say your goals really should be the things that you want to accomplish, that you're going to be proud of. That's the thing. What am I going to be proud of that I did? What's going to be meaningful? It's not positions, because the best positions, the positions that you probably really are aspiring to, will seek out accomplished people. It's not that people will actually seek out those positions and get them. It's much easier and better the way I'm suggesting. Second, what's the role of research in advancing and promoting your advancement, I think was the expression, or advancing your promotion, either way. And I would just say to you, I think that research and education are the vehicles of accomplishment, not the rungs on the ladder of success. And truthfully, if you're going to be a physician scientist, you're going to be an investigator, you're going to be an academic physician, the only reason to do it is because you love it, because you crave it, because the truth of it is, it's sort of a hard life. It's filled with anxiety, and I think probably the reason a lot of people come to these kind of scholar sessions is because they have anxiety about what to do. And I think that the anxieties change. Okay, they don't actually go away. Somebody said to me, oh, you're going to stop being chair. Does that mean your life is going to be more relaxed? I said, I actually think people, they find new anxieties. Okay, they get rid of the old ones, and it's a conservation of some kind of energy. But an academic life is a hard life, and it is filled with anxiety, and it is punctuated with failure. Okay, those may not be public failures, they're personal failures, but it's punctuated that way. And success. I think your successes are sublime. They're truly satisfying. That's why people do it. They're hooked on it. But the successes are generally, not for everybody, but for almost everybody. They're infrequent. They're not widely appreciated. And they're very personal. The success is very personal. If you think that other people are going to think highly of the things that you think are your real accomplishments, you may not be correct. Okay? They're going to value things that you didn't think were that important. Okay? There's a real mismatch in this kind of a career, and it's a very inward-looking kind of career in many ways. And so the reason to do it is because you're hooked on it. You really want to do it. It's not because it's the next rung up to climb the ladder. And I would say the same thing is really true of education. Okay, the reason you have to do that is because of the satisfactions. If you think it's going to advance your career, there's probably easier ways to do that. You may have wanted to consider business school. So I guess the question I would say is why do you want to advance your career? I'm being a little bit cynical about this. Advancement isn't good. Well, there are some really good reasons to want to advance your career. Okay. One of the things that advancing your career does is it gives you access to more resources, which can allow you to achieve larger and broader goals. And depending on what you want to accomplish, that can be really important. In a pragmatic sense, it really does give you the ability to attract more talented colleagues. And your success, this is where I like the social media part, okay, is really dependent on the quality of your interactions and the quality of your colleagues, regardless of whether you run a lab or you do clinical trials or you're an epidemiologist. It's being surrounded by talented people elevates you and facilitates your work. It gives you more opportunity to collaborate. People are more interested in collaborating with people who are more advanced. And in the end, my belief is that the true role of academic medicine and academic anesthesiology, what we're here to do is to influence medicine and science. I like to tell our applying residents that a career in community medicine and community anesthesiology is a really noble career. You really influence the lives of your patients. But a career in academic medicine is you influence everyone's practice. And so if that's what you're out to do, advancement is helpful. But for a lot of people, they say, that's all great, Alex, but I really want to be a leader. I aspire to leadership. And people tell me that all the time. I aspire to being a leader. And I just want to say that's not necessarily for everybody. Some accomplished people just want to accomplish more. Okay, and I think in many ways they're the really lucky ones. But some accomplished people want to help others emulate their success. They see that as a mission and a goal, and I think that's a good reason to, I don't know if to aspire to leadership, but maybe to accede to leadership. And there's a bunch of things you can do in those roles. I think one really important one is you can inspire people. People are good at getting things done, but inspiring them really can help. You can enable them, okay? And the ways you can enable them are with money, space, and time, right? The ineluctable modalities, as Joyce would say. And you can also facilitate their career in part through mentorship. And so I think those are ways in which being a leader is something to aspire to. I would say if you are tapped for leadership, okay, at some point in your career, I do think the really good thing when I look back on it is you can really help people emulate what you are good at, the reason you got there. There's always a temptation to think, you're also can really help people and mentor people at the things that you're okay at. And I would say that's actually probably a mistake. You should really enlist others to help with areas where you are less accomplished, and that's where shared leadership is a really good value. So that's the philosophy part of my talk. I want to now go to some nitty-gritty kind of practical advice, and I aimed this at at people who are very much at the early stage of their career. So for those of you who are further advanced, you don't have to stay. But the, you know, the, thank you, Viv. The, so the first thing is mentors and sponsors. I really think, this isn't how I was trained, but I do think assembling a group of mentors who can help you with various aspects of your development is valuable. And I do think sometimes there's one person who embodies all the aspects of things that you want to be mentored in, but a lot of times it's not true. The person who can mentor you in science may not be the same person who can mentor you to be a really good clinician. And the reality is that in every realm of what you do, mentorship matters. You're an apprentice, okay, and you are probably not going to be better than the best people who guide you. So I think getting a group of mentors is helpful. I think the reality is you need to go out and find them. You need to think about all the areas that you really want to exceed in and to find those people who are going to really help you in each of those areas. Organizational mentor matchmaking, it's been widely espoused. I try to do it, but I think, frankly, it's hit and miss, which means it's worth doing because it works occasionally. But it's the best usually works out when you have formed a personal bond and your mentor feels responsible to you. It's also helpful to have sponsors. And I think something that people often don't differentiate is the difference between a mentor and a sponsor. Okay? Sometimes that's the same person, and sometimes it's not. Okay? Sometimes there's overlap. And sponsors are great because they create opportunities for you. Okay? And a good division or department head is sometimes is a good sponsor, sometimes not. Sometimes they're an extractor from you rather than a contributor to you. But when it works well, it works well. And other people like journal editors, grant reviewers, organizational leaders, and all, these are potentially people who it's really worth knowing because they'll think of you when opportunities come. This isn't corruption or something like that. It's just that people go to people who they know and they think of. Everybody says this. I'm going to say what everybody else says. Focus. Okay? Doing one thing very well always trumps doing many things adequately. That's not a double entendre. And the basic thing is finish what you start. Okay? When you take something on, finish it. It's amazing how one thing at a time, they add up. The accomplishments add up. They become sequential. They build one on the other. And trying to do a lot of different things, you tend not to finish them. Okay? Lots of people can get 2/3 of the way through or 3/4 of the way through something. It's getting it published, okay? Doing the last thing that you have to do, doing the hard parts, responding to the criticisms, finishing it. It's the single biggest determinant of success. And in that regard, don't take on too many projects. Lots of people are going to ask you to do lots of things, and there's all kinds of things that seem interesting. Take on the number of things that you can do and finish them. In that regard, no is a really good word to have in your vocabulary. What are some no's that you should think about? I would say at the beginning of your career, administration's a no. Okay? I think that it's a distraction. It's an emotional distraction and a time distraction. And so I think at the beginning of anyone's career, what they need to do is to be really selfish. They need to be selfish about making themselves better, about learning as much as they can, about accruing some accomplishments, because once you've done that, you actually have more to give other people. If you don't have a lot to give, you can't give that much. Same thing, national committees, very tempting. You've been asked to serve on a national committee or something. Yeah, it may further your political career, okay, but it's not going to further your academic career. And the same thing, editorial responsibilities. And I'm thinking here about reviewing papers. If you do a good job reviewing a paper, it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of effort. I would encourage all of you to review papers in your own area because you'll learn a lot from it.
Okay, you really benefit from it, but say no to things that are not in your area, at least early on in your career. It can be broadening later on, but at the beginning, it's just one more distraction. So productivity. You know, you want to put all your energy into things that work, okay? You might start 3 projects, and one of them just seems to be going okay, it works pretty well, but you really have a passion about one that's not working. You're in love with your hypothesis, you're in love with your idea, and it's not quite working out. I think many of us, myself included, have fallen prey to this at times. And so you keep trying one more thing. You're going to be much more productive if you go with the things that are working. And in that regard, beware of pursuing tangents. You know, you observe something and it leads to another idea. It's fine to pursue some of those tangents, but not at the expense of sticking with the main thing that you're trying to do. And again, you know, finish things. It's the single most important thing. I'm going to repeat it a few times in this talk because I think if you remember one thing that I said here, it's that, finish things. What about papers? Do you have targets for papers? Well, think about it. In business, dollars are the currency. In academia, peer-reviewed, high-impact publications are the currency. Okay, if you don't have those, okay, you're a poor person. And if you do, you're a wealthy person. That's what it's about. I would encourage people at the beginning of their careers to target one. It's great if you have 2, but 1 first authored original paper in a good journal per year. That's at the beginning. And even later in your career, 2 or 3 first or senior authored papers. You know, first or senior authored original papers in good journals per year is really a very reasonable target. This isn't about getting the largest possible number of publications. People look at the quality of what you do. Review articles can be valuable, but only if you think they're going to be influential. Writing a lot of review articles about this topic and that topic is tangential and distracting. And book chapters are generally not a good use of time. What about lots of papers where you're the middle author? You know, it looks good, you have the numbers long, it looks great on PubMed, but I think the sophisticated reviewer, the person who's reading your grant, for example, okay, actually looks and says, how many original, high-quality papers that you really did are important? I think people look at these other things and they say, oh, that person's a very good collaborator. But they're actually not looking, okay, at what your real accomplishment is. They're looking at a personality trait, which is that you're a good collaborator. Grants, well, it's really simple. You do have to support your work and your time. It's a privilege. It's a real privilege to be allowed to be pursuing knowledge. And it's an expensive privilege. And so you should aspire to being somewhat independent. And frankly, you can't get funded. You can get funded. Alex, you can't get funded if you don't apply. Yeah, you all wish it was true the other way, right? I just would encourage people to set a realistic goal, to sequentially apply for grants. Start out with the institutional ones, the foundation ones, the K-type grants, and then the independent research grants. Have a measured plan, okay, and really try to stick to it. And have criteria for what's going to get you there, because there's a discipline about this. There's always a reason why you don't have enough, why you're not ready, and you don't apply. And if you don't apply, you can't get funded, right? Okay. I think reading and learning about the basics of grant writing is a really valuable thing to do. No one ever taught me to do that. I sort of winged it and have sort of learned on the fly. A few years ago, I actually read this book about how to write a grant that the NIH puts out, and it's really, really good. And I've adopted some of the things that they put in there. There are courses in this. I can't encourage you enough to take advantage of those things. And timeliness is really important. Write these things a couple of months in advance, okay? Especially when you're starting out, and get some really good readers, experienced, critical readers. The person who's smart and reads it and gives you a few comments and says good makes you feel good, but it doesn't help you. You want a person who's going to say, I don't get this, I'm confused, I don't like the way this reads. And it's important. Students, I've discouraged you from doing distracting things. Actually, teaching attracts students and other trainees. Having good students is really is helpful. It's really fun. It's part of the academic experience, and I'd really encourage people to do that. But be selective in who you train, okay? Taking students who are not engaged or not capable is, again, it's actually discouraging and distracting. And when you have somebody who's promising, really invest in them. And invest in them, not in you, not in your use of them. Invest in them. That will pay dividends in the long run. You'll get a good reputation. More people will come to you. And you'll feel good about what you've done. Stamina. I said this was hard. You got to be able to take a punch. You definitely have to learn to deal with rejection and with conflict. Hanging on my, over my lab desk is this piece of 35-year-old piece of paper. It says, "Don't let the bastards get you down," and I since submitted my first paper. It was to the Journal of Clinical Investigation, and I got a harsh review, and actually a little bit of an unfair review. But it eventually was published there. I protested. It was published, but my mentor, Dr. Phil Needleman, he didn't say anything. He read the review, and he just left this on my desk, and I've kept it ever since. So I do this. And the other thing is, it's really important to be right, but if you're wrong, own it, okay? Sort of the integrity of what you do is very important. These are a couple of things now about sort of demeanor and behavior rather than advice. I would say that discovery is so much better than refutation. Try to prove things rather than disprove them. Refutation turns out to be really necessary and really important, but frankly, it uses up a lot of ATP, okay, and it uses up goodwill. And so I think I wouldn't completely shy away from taking on things that you don't think are right, but it's something I wouldn't focus on. In terms of demeanor, I think it's really important to be tolerant. And if you feel strongly about things, that can be hard sometimes. But remember, sometimes really smart people actually do say dumb things, and you shouldn't be intolerant, because you probably do it too. And more importantly, I think, sometimes we're all not smart enough to realize or appreciate the smart things that people say. They come to us later that they were really good. I would encourage everybody to be a person of integrity, to stand by what you believe, but it's probably better to avoid academic conflict, because frankly, you never know who's going to review your grants, papers, and promotions. And finally, I'd just say 3 things. Make sure you think clearly, have principles, feel strongly about them, but try to talk softly about them. You're not here to bludgeon people into agreeing with you. They'll be convinced by your accomplishments. So I just want to finish up by going back to my poem. When you are old and gray and full of sleep and you slowly read the book of your book and dream, I hope that you're going to dream about how you've positively impacted the life accomplishments and satisfaction of people, of your family, your friends, your colleagues, and your students. That's actually, there's 2 elements really to a meaningful academic career from my perspective, from where I stand, and I hope you'll think about what you're going to do in this way. One of them is the influence you have on people, and academically, that's going to be your colleagues and your students, and that's actually really your legacy, is your colleagues and your students. For most of us, that's what it'll be. But don't neglect your family and friends. And then the second component to this is your accomplishments. And I hope that your work will, in some small or large way, have advanced human knowledge and improve the human condition, because those are the 2 things that we're actually striving to do. And it's easy to lose sight of that by the prizes and the trinkets that lie along the way. So my last slide is just this, to say there really is no pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. You only find gold by digging deeper not by climbing higher. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you both for those wonderful and diverse perspectives on how to influence your own careers and improve academic medicine. I think we have time for maybe 2 questions if anybody has something to ask, and then it'd be really nice to do some of the networking opportunities that Dr. Privataski has set up. So anybody have any questions for these 2 esteemed gentlemen? I'll ask, yeah, go ahead. Yeah, you can use the microphone and introduce yourself, please.
I have a question for Dr. George. I'm Mark from Washington University, one of the residents there. So in talking about social media, I think one of the things that is becoming more popular in the social medicine type thing is, I guess, case discussions, or what I see a lot of is pictures of EKGs or echoes or things like that. Is there any kind of advice you can give on, because it is a public forum that you're entering into, advice on how to do that tactfully and also ethically, and any kind of, do you think it's useful or beneficial in the social media setting?
Thanks, Mark. I absolutely think it's beneficial, and there's a number of good examples. One of them is recently ASRA has developed some problem-based learning discussions, where they put cases and invite discussion, dialogue around that. And I think you see a great conversation and learning opportunities for people of all kind of points in their career and opportunities that do exist. There is some concerns I have in that area. Is when we post things like EKGs, and I see that all the time, there's a lot of metadata that's hidden in those images, depending where you get them, and you need to be cautious of that. And frankly, I've seen some flagrant, thank you, missteps when it comes to sharing things like EKGs or X-rays, where wouldn't take very much skill to figure out where that came from. But within the metadata, I mean, the date and time, GPS location, depending on the camera you took, I mean, all that's within the metadata of those pictures. And so that has to be, you have to take that into context. But I think I like to put some good advice there is talk softly, respect everybody's opinions. You don't need to join into those dialogues and beat someone down that your answer is correct. Yeah.
Monica Lupe from the University of Minnesota. Thank you for the excellent talks and the great advices. And I would dare to ask a rather philosophical, provoking question that I'm struggling with at this point of my career. I'm already faculty. Do we really need to focus on goals, or there is a way to see our career as a natural progression and focus more on the journey than just on the success?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting question, and I don't think the 2 things are mutually exclusive. Just my take on human psychology is that people do well with goals. If they have things to aspire to, that there are targets, they don't drift, and they go to the target. I think it's great to have long-term goals, a big accomplishment that you want to make, but it's got to be broken up into smaller pieces, and sometimes one piece leads in a totally different direction. And in that respect, it's a journey. It's just that the pieces, the aliquots, the increments of the journey, they're not continuous. I would say they're incremental, they're stepwise.
And to add to that, I learned a lot reflecting on what Alex was presenting. I'm at a transition point in my life, and I am starting to recognize the interaction between the journey and the goals. Mm-hmm. And there was a good session earlier today around nudging and making change. And Alex is right, the goals are essential, but you do need to kind of pay attention to the journey as you're going along, and don't be afraid to kind of adjust that journey based upon what your needs are at that time. I agree with that.
So Stu Foreman from MGH, and I just want to thank both of you for wonderful talks, particularly Alex. You found the pot of gold, and you achieved positions of authority. And I guess one way to frame what this little discussion was just going on is, are those goals internally determined, or are they the ones that are more generally sort of valued by the community and more in the form of acknowledgement? So that's just a comment. For Ron in particular, how much time do you spend on social media? Because I'll be honest, I take public transportation in Boston, and it seems like 98% of the people around me are, I mean, I don't know if they're on social media, but they're on their screens all the time. We do see this behavior in the operating room from time to time, maybe more frequently than that. But as a tool for career enhancement, what percentage of your time would you say you spend on it? And, given that that's a way to attract attention and maybe more external validation of yourself rather than internal drive to achieve something substantial. How do you value it relative to, say, publishing a paper, getting promoted, and all this other stuff?
Well, first, I probably spend way more than anybody in this room does on it. But part of that now is I do use what I've learned to help different organizations with their social media plans, like the Canadian Anesthesia Society, Canadian Journal of Anesthesia, Society of Obstetric Anesthesia. And so I spend a lot of time on those aspects as well. But personally, social media can be a very big time suck, and you need to be cognizant of that. Early on, you will certainly be more self-promoting, but you'll quickly find that it's short-lived. There's not a lot to gain in that, really. There's not a lot of external validation that you're actually going to get, because those people shine through. I think we're all looking for very authentic relationships. And whether you believe it or not, those do exist on social media, and you will develop those more authentic, real relationships where it's not necessarily what externally validation I'm getting. And I think that does eventually happen. You do need to be cognizant of your time, but one of the things that I help people with is trying to develop and show them the tools that exist out there to make it easier. It really isn't that hard. And there are a lot of tools out there that can make it even easier for someone who's interested in evaluating and using this tool for their research or their line of interest that they're working in. So, find somebody like I like to call it a twenter. Find yourself a Twitter mentor, okay? And figure out what are those tools out there, because they totally exist. There's an individual at the Mayo Clinic who does a lot of social media how-to, and she produces some wonderful material out there, and it's very healthcare focused. And so she really understands how physicians and other healthcare workers use social media and what we need to do to make our lives easier and to stop using the time up that is so precious. But, you do need to be cognizant of and watch that. I don't know if anybody has updated. The new update of the iPhone has the screen time function on there, which warns you of the time you're spending. I ignore that completely because it would, I advocate for it, but if I use it just makes me feel a little bit discouraged. But it's just the nature of what I like to do, and it's morphed into not only being what I do personally, but also from a professional standpoint, utilizing it for different groups as well. So it can be a time suck, but there are ways around that, and be cautious of that.
Great. Well, thank you very much. I think in the discussion of time, unfortunately, we're going to hold the other question, and you can ask it privately, and we're going to continue on with the networking portion of the talk.
All right.
Thank you.
Yeah, excellent panels. So the next thing that we're going to do is this is going to just be a brief session. I know we're running a little bit over, and the next session starts we'll start a little after 4. So we're going to have, what we're going to do with this networking is what I really want people to do is find other people that are doing somewhat similar things or in similar areas to start to make connections. So the first half, what we're going to do is I'll be on half the room, and I've broken this up into if you're more like a basic wet lab type of research, clinical research, education, QI. get in those broad groups where the table tents are, and then in the second half, we're going to more break into like specific types of research, whether that's pain, neuroscience, and that. And so I'm hoping we're going to make connections with people there. So hopefully they're set up in the right side. But try to find, so the first groups are like basic science, clinical, QI, education. So